Thank you very much. My name is Scott Gessler. I'm Secretary of State in the state of Colorado. So I think many people are familiar with a lot of the things that affect voter integrity. We've got bloated and inaccurate voter rolls. We have a very loose honor system when it comes to voting in this country, both in the registration and voting as well. Oftentimes, for example, no forms of ID or no photo ID required. And over time, we've seen the increased use of mail ballots, which, while it has many good points, also increases a very common avenue for voter fraud. But I think what underlies a lot of this and what causes a challenge is what I call sort of a culture of see no evil, hear no evil. A see no evil, hear no evil culture. And this argument is ironically propagated by some of the same people who see massive corruption when it comes to a campaign finance system. They see massive corruption in the ballot initiative process. But when it comes to voting in the polling booth, our hearts have become pure without malice. And but the see no evil, hear no evil culture, I think, results in a couple real problems that we have, and is caused by some issues. I think first and foremost, you see a real politicization of some of the efforts at maintaining voter integrity, and you see that certainly in the photo ID debates, where people who support photo ID are immediately accused of the basest motives and terrible things, and drawing examples from problems we've had in American history, oftentimes almost always, with no evidence whatsoever. You see sort of that level of politicization. I think you also see from this culture of see no evil, hear no evil, it's reflected in state election systems, where more often than not, states have inadequate systems when it comes to the detection and the prevention of both voter fraud and error as well. And although there are many protections in place, there are real glaring deficiencies, particularly in the collection of the data to be able to provide the type of base work analysis that we need. I mean, a good example from Colorado, I held a rulemaking actually earlier this week, and one of the people who testified, a woman in Denver, Colorado, said that sort of during the canvassing and after the election, they identified in a nursing home, one of the major ones in the city of Denver, 14 people who had voted, well, supposedly had voted, who had died in the past or moved away just in that one area. And I was a little embarrassed because that happened 2 years ago. I asked her about it. And this woman was a friend of mine who I've known for 3 or 4 years, and she knew I was running and am now Secretary of State. And that was the first I had ever heard of it. And she had instead reported it to our local clerk and recorder, who did nothing. Actually, the clerk and recorder did something, which was there's a prior clerk and recorder, a local election official, which was accuse the people who made those reports of acting and doing terrible things and suppressing votes and things like that. So you see the lack of a detection system, the lack of collection of information, and then this culture of see no evil, hear no evil. And part of the thing that causes this is a policy infrastructure that the people who support that culture have developed over time, very well financed, very assertive in its arguments, willing to produce what I think is evidence, very, very poor quality, yet push this hard. I think that there's good news. I think there's some real opportunities and dynamics. And first and foremost is that the see no evil, hear no evil culture does not have majority support in this country. Now, I think we all want to believe that everyone is of good faith and willing to do the right thing. But I think Americans intuitively understand that in any human endeavor, and elections are hard, complicated human endeavors, in any human endeavor, there is a small proportion of people who will, when tempted, do the wrong thing, who, when tempted, will break the law. And political power, as gained through elections, is a temptation. And that tempts people to do bad things. And I think Americans intuitively understand that. So this sort of predominant see no evil, hear no evil culture is, I think, ultimately built on a foundation of sand, so to speak. And I see 3 things going on. One is those who focus on election integrity are beginning to build a policy infrastructure to bring those ideas forth for improvements. And I think True the Vote's a great example, Heritage Foundation. These are sort of 2 leading examples. There's still a huge imbalance here today as we stand in the country, but it's beginning to change. The second thing we're seeing, I think, are really good policy breakthroughs. And Secretary Kobach, I think, has some great evidence. And what we're seeing is, for example, in the photo ID debate, is a really good example. We have certain states, Kansas is one, Indiana, Georgia, who have instituted photo identification. And so we're able to collect data. We're able to look at the results of that. And we're seeing that the results in America are, in many ways, the same results as all over the world, every other place that's instituted photo ID, which is increased election integrity, increased confidence in elections. Sometimes it's correlated with increased voter turnout, substantial increased voter turnout, and a whole lot of good things. And I think that shows that some of this disenfranchisement hysteria is frankly silly. And then I think there's a third opportunity, and that's the opportunity in what I almost would call administrative complexity. Now, unlike Kansas, certain states, for example, Colorado, do not have a consensus for broad, sweeping legislative changes. Nonetheless, as I say, elections are difficult, complex things, and there are plenty of opportunities to make improvements. I liken elections almost to software. You know, sometimes when software is released, some would say always when software is released, there are bugs in the software, vulnerabilities, like vulnerabilities in our elections. And sometimes those bugs are released and no one ever touches them and nothing goes wrong and everything's fine. And sometimes you'll run across a bug and you'll have problems. You'll have to shut down your computer, or you'll have some type of inconvenience. A program gets hung up for a while. So you know there's a problem, but it's one that still allows you to accomplish your task. And then there's bugs that shut down your computer and wipe out your system and you lose all your data. And those are some types of vulnerabilities we have in our elections system when there's a problem there. And so there are lots of ways to improve, but it requires getting at the nuts and bolts. I think True the Vote is doing some of that as well, as have other states. And we've got examples in Colorado, and I think you're seeing that, for example, in the citizenship debate, where we're developing evidence, we're identifying problems, and we're making specific changes to address those within the administrative machinery. So overall, I'm hopeful that this culture of see no evil, hear no evil will over time give way to a sensible culture where we want people to do the right things, and we know that in the vast majority of instances that happens. We also know that human nature being what it is, we have to continually be prepared to address the vulnerabilities in our system, new bugs, ones that come up, and the old ones as well that we've seen happen repeatedly in American history. So thank you very much.